our first winter storm of the season coming. We're supposed to get some snow, a few inches of snow, but it's starting to rain right now. So we are out getting everybody ready for the winter. So first up we have Angus, who's usually always a pretty good boy to blanket. And blanketing horses can be kind of a controversy because they do have a natural warmth that they use in like raising their fur and lowering it to trap in air so they can heat it up. So they are pretty good at keeping themselves warm in the wild. One thing about what we have is we have a lot of wind, which can really get underneath that hair and ruin their natural ability to keep themselves warm. So while we always make sure that they have access to shelters and windbreaks, we also want to make sure they stay warm if it gets really windy, because the wind doesn't always come from the most manageable of directions. Next up we have Miss Canary Berry, and Canary's had kind of a rough past, so we usually have to take it a little bit slower blanketing, but once she knows what we're doing, she's usually pretty chill about it. You can see it's already kind of starting to get windy, starting to rain a bit. Miss Canary has planned ahead and put on some weight for the winter, so I had to keep lengthening her belly straps because they wouldn't fit. Mr. Rio has been practicing wearing a blanket, but it's a little bit different putting it on in ideal conditions versus when it's windy like this. So this is the first time he's actually had a blanketing event where we've had to, get it on him to keep him warm instead of just practice with it. So Jana's really practicing with him and making sure he's okay with it, not just kind of shoving it on, and so we'll have a good experience for next time too. It can be harder for the blankets that have to go over their heads, but it's also a good experience for him and good practice being comfortable with human things. You can see the wind really picking up and blowing dirt around, and it can get pretty bad out here. My sister, on the other hand, is pretty much a pro at this. Doesn't even need a halter, you just kind of throw it on, and she's pretty good with it. She just likes the attention. Like Rio, this is Sedona's first blanketing event, and we've put it on her before just to practice, but that's, in much better weather and not a time that, we're kind of trying to beat the rain before they get wet to get it on. But we didn't expect her to be too bad. She's a pretty reasonable girl. She's very smart and calm. Boomer had his too, but he was a good boy, so we kind of snuck it on him. And then Valkyrie, we have to take off her sun shirt first. Wyoming's very sunny most of the year, so she has to wear it all year round, but we don't want to burden her with too many clothes, so we take it off before we put the blanket on. Valkyrie's also super good about the blanket. She's been newly dubbed Cupcake as her new nickname by one of our volunteers, just because she's so good and sweet all the time. Cora's typically pretty good too, but this is her first time being blanketed since last year, so it's always good to review and go slow and make sure they're still okay with it. At this point, it had started to rain pretty good and the wind was getting really bad, but we still had to reorganize the horses so that they all had access to shelter and windbreaks and friends. They were by friends, horses that they got along with. That's always a bit of a challenge. Next up was Pretty Paris, and so I do want to give a shout out to all these red blankets that you see on our rescue horses were all donated by A Home for Every Horse and Weather Beta. So they have a really awesome program where they help, donate blankets to horse rescues, and make sure that they don't have to pay out of pocket, because out of pocket each of these blankets would be between $100 and $200. So thank you so much. We really appreciate that program, and that's really awesome. Big shout out to them. And even after the storm, everyone stayed nice and snug in their blankies.